I already hated him because even though it was never specifically said in the movie which one of Buddy Repperton's gang shit on the dashboard of Christine, but you know it was him.
It was him.
It was him.
It was him.
But
Yeah.
hey guys, welcome to the Video Express, where we dust off old VHS tapes and discuss all things horror, sci-fi, and exploitation. I'm Matt,
And I'm Katie.
and welcome to Jill Schoelen month here on the show. Before we get things rolling, Katie, tell our fine listeners what is our first spotlight movie of Jill Schoelen month.
All right. Well, today we are talking about Popcorn, released in 1991, a mere 7 months before I entered this world. So, great year. This movie was directed by Mark Harrier? I'm not sure
Harriet,
how he pronounces his
I
last name.
think.
And sort of also directed by Alan Ormsby, but we'll get into it. And yeah, I am very excited to talk about this movie today.
As am I. But before we dive into it, Katie, tell us what is going on in the cinema world right now.
Okay, so if you listen to last episode, you'll know that these first few episodes we recorded a little bit earlier than the release date. So by the time you're listening to this, these movies and one of them is actually a series will have been out for a couple of months. But like I said last episode, there's just so many things coming out all the time. I personally just like to have specific recommendations because there's so many good things that's pretty easy to miss. So the first thing is, of course, on Shudder. Actually, two of my recommendations are on Shudder today, of course. And this is Eli Roth's History of Horror. This was a show that originally premiered on AMC, and Shudder acquired it, so they just dropped season 2 on there. And so I have mixed feelings about Eli Roth, but the good news is that whether you like him or not, he's kind of just the host of the show. He just kind of drives some of the interviews, but the actual content itself is very interesting and very exciting. They've got great people that they're interviewing, like Greg Nicotero and Rob Zombie, and just going through different subgenres of horror and kind of tracking the history and like how that related to culture and whatnot. So definitely, if you're a horror fan, I recommend that. This next one is a movie that just dropped on Shudder today. December 17th when we're recording this. So I haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but I watched the trailer and it looks amazing. And it's called The Pale Door. And this is a Western horror movie. And the little blurb next to it on Shudder says, after a botched train robbery, two brothers and their gang of cowboys must survive the night in a ghost town inhabited by a coven of witches. And based on the trailer, they're not just like sexy cool witches, they're like monsters, like straight up scary, bloodthirsty, vicious monster witches. So it looks like a really fun time.
Nice.
And then the only other recommendation I have today, it's not really a movie. It's more just like a shout out to Synapse Films. They put together the Blu-ray of Popcorn that I watched when preparing for this episode, and it included a really interesting 1-hour making of documentary and the special features. And I've always, I've been a fan of Synapse Films since they released the absolutely exquisite 4K restoration of Dario Argento's Suspiria, which might be my favorite horror movie of all time. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Considering the first time I watched that movie, it was on a shitty laptop in a dorm room with like no sound, no subtitles, nothing. So I definitely recommend them. They have a crazy catalog of like ridiculous, out there B movies and things that you just can't find on streaming services today. So check them out.
Absolutely, yeah. Synapse is definitely one of the top tier distributors of some really great cult films. Like you said, their catalog is ridiculously good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Katie, for bringing us up to date on some cool things that's going on. But now let's go ahead and officially kick off Jill Schoelen month, and of course our movie of the night, Popcorn. As always, this is usually the case where it's a movie that I've watched umpteen times, and then you are probably a first time watcher. So I'll let you go first. What is your first initial thoughts on Popcorn?
My first thought is that I'm so thankful that this movie has come into my life. I can't believe that I missed it. It's completely up my alley. I loved every minute watching it. It was truly. I mean, I honestly. We were talking before we started recording. Not really a whole lot of critiques for this one because it's actually very well made and it's very fun to watch and it's legitimately pretty scary at times. So yeah, and it's got great vibes, great setting at this big old beautiful theater in Kingston, Jamaica, which it wasn't supposed to be set, like the movie itself isn't set in Jamaica, but it was shot in Jamaica. And I love everything about it. The vibe was great, the villain's great, the makeup's great. I'm a fan.
Awesome. I actually had no idea that it was shot in Jamaica, so you've got one on me.
Haha.
Yeah,
Yes,
so
some facts about the production we'll get into in a little bit, but yeah, some interesting things behind the scenes.
cool. Yeah, and I'm gonna be like a broken record by now, but that's what I like about this is I get to watch, a movie that I've watched a million times and just be able to spout shit that I know, and then you get to come at me with facts that you've researched on, and everybody kind of learns something new. And for people that it's not seen the movie, you get to learn everything. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you liked it. I knew it was when I was making the list of things for us to watch. I knew this was a really good one to throw on there just because I hate to call it obscure, but it kind of is. It's not a movie that is on anybody's lips when you're in big crowds and talking about, cult horror films and stuff like that. And the reason I wanted to, not just specifically this movie, but one of the reasons why it shows Jill Schoelen is our first spotlight, for lack of a better term, Scream Queen month is because she's, to me personally, kind of an unsung hero of the Scream Queens. You never hear her name brought up, uh, hardly ever. I mean, you get your old, your typical people, your Jamie Lee Curtises and your Adrienne Barbeau's and people like that. But Jill Schoelen is kind of never mentioned, which is a damn shame because she put out a very nice catalog of horror films and in kind of a short amount of time. She, not only Popcorn, but she was in the original Stepfather film, Cutting Class, which I think was one of Brad Pitt's first movies. The extremely underrated Phantom of the Opera version that starred Robert Englund. She was in When a
Oh,
Stranger
wow.
Calls. Yeah, which if we'll probably have that movie on one of our future episodes, just because it's my probably favorite version of Phantom of the Opera. Uh,
That sounds incredible.
yeah, it is. And then also she was, this is one that you never hear about really people talk, or mention that she was in, or even the movie itself, but she was in, When a Stranger Calls Back, which was the TV sequel to the original When a Stranger Calls. So, again, she has a good catalog of horror films, and I think maybe one of the reasons that she's just not championed as much as the others is just because she kind of dropped off the face of the earth there for a while and just kind of got out of the scene. So maybe she wasn't in the consciousness of everybody, but still, I think she's great, and I think she deserves her spot as a scream queen, and that's why I wanted to go ahead and start off with Popcorn and kind of give her go.
Yeah, I really enjoyed watching her. I had never really heard of her before watching this movie, so now I'm excited to go back and maybe watch some more movies from her catalog, and especially the one that we're gonna do for the next episode. So, but before we get too into the characters, I was thinking, what's different about this episode compared to the last episode is that the plot in this movie is actually coherent enough to say in a short little blurb. So I was wondering, Matt, if you would like to give our listeners just a really quick bare bones overview of what this movie's about and what happens.
It's funny, you say that, and just so people know, this show is technically not scripted. Uh, Katie and I are literally just two friends right now, just talking about a fucking movie we watched. So none of this stuff is pre thought out. So I'm technically on the spot right now with explaining this movie. Thankfully, she didn't put me on the spot with explaining Howling 3, and I get to do popcorn. But yeah, it's kind of, I hate to say it's bare bones, but in a way it is. But it's a razor thin plot, but it gets right to the point and kind of keeps going and never really lets up. Basically, a group of kids. I guess you would say college kids. They're in a class. And they put together a film festival at a theater, and the film festival is to show old classic horror movies. And they rig the theater up very much in the vein of William Castle, with like shocking
Hmm.
theater seats and things flying over the audience and stuff like that. Meanwhile, while this is all going on, there is a certain evil being that is stalking them one by one inside the theater. And our lead actress Jill Schoelen, her character of Maggie, keeps having visions and premonitions of this killer, and things just keep getting spookier from there on.
Hmm. I think that gives a good foundation. And if you haven't watched the movie yet, I think that doesn't really spoil. Although there may be a spoiler or two later on down the road. Just
Oh yeah,
warning you ahead
we'll
of
get into
time.
heavy spoilers.
Yeah, but I think that lays the foundation. So yeah, maybe we should just go through each of these characters. We've talked a little bit about Jill Schoelen, but I would like to talk just more about her character in general of Maggie.
Yeah, absolutely.
She Yeah, so I think she's a really fun, interesting leading lady. I feel like she doesn't something about her look is really unique.
Hmm.
She doesn't look like a lot of the final girls of the 70s and 80s.
Right.
And so I think that's really cool. Like this coming out in 1991, it's like we're entering a new decade, a new era of final girls. So I wonder how much other movies were inspired by this. Maybe they weren't, but to me it's like the sign of a trend towards maybe a different look or a different type of person to be the leading lady.
It's funny you actually mentioned that, because as you mentioned, she kind of doesn't look the same as a lot of the Scream Queen final girls or whatever. I mean, the only thing I would put her on par with is maybe the your final girls from like the Friday the 13th films, maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
But you're right. Her look is she's very much a natural beauty. I think she's gorgeous, but
Mhm.
she's a natural beauty, and she just kind of really embodies that girl next door vibe that every horror movie tries to capture. So I think she holds herself well in that regard. However, as much as this is Jill Schoelen month and we are spotlighting popcorn, I will have to say that even though she is our lead character in this film, I do kind of feel that she doesn't have a whole lot to do. And I mean,
Mhm.
she I guess she has more to do than the other characters, of course, because she is our lead. But I don't feel like there's a whole lot of meat to the bones of her story, and that's not a negative, because
Mhm.
again, the movie does move along at a good brisk pace, and I feel like every character kind of has a good amount of screen time. I just feel like maybe there wasn't a lot for her to do, and again, it's not her fault. I feel like maybe that's just falls more on just the writing end.
Yeah, I think well, and we'll kind of get into some of the details in our next section when we talk about the actual production of this movie, but
Mhm.
I think some of the lacking of depth in her character or lacking of things for her to do has a lot to do with how this movie was made and
Okay.
some of the drama that happened behind the scenes. I think maybe that influenced it quite a bit. Like,
So I'm excited now.
long story short, this was a mess. Long story short, this was a mess fraught with drama and almost running out of money like 3 times. They almost thought they were gonna have to, like, just cancel the whole thing.
Wow.
So, definitely was a bit of a mess. So I think that's why, and there's another kinda key to that I'll get into later, but, I think as a premise, it's a really cool premise for a character. I like that she's having these visions that they don't ever really like fully explain, which I think is
Right.
cool. They kind of leave a little an extra kind of supernatural edge to it. Um, but I really think Tom Villard steals the show for me as Toby.
Really?
I
I,
thought he was I just think he's so good and so fun. I don't know. And and again, I have a little bit more context. I just appreciate him as a person a little bit more after watching this making of documentary on the Blu-ray from Synapse Films.
see, it's funny 'cause, again, you're shedding light on all kinds of new stuff that I don't know about because you get to watch a very fucking nice 4K scan, high def Blu-ray with making ofs while I'm sitting in my man cave watching a worn out VHS tape. But I'm going to be on the opposite end of the fence with you on this one, which it's going to tend to happen on these
That's
shows.
fair.
Um, I'm not a huge fan of his character. I knowing now, you saying that this was a mess and stuff behind the scenes, which something I wasn't aware of, makes more sense now because of things that happen in the movie. That there's certain little plots that kind of tend to go nowhere. It's not a detriment, but just there's
Yeah.
some little things that just kind of make your head scratch. But anyway, I'm kind of getting off topic here. But one of the things I wrote down in my notes, which going with Tom Villard as his character, I wrote down over the top, not necessarily bad, but reminds me of Jim Carrey.
Yeah, okay. And I think that's what I really liked. So I will say that he doesn't really shine as a character until spoiler alert, it's revealed that he is actually the killer and
Right.
he's got this crazy like burn scars all over his face and like little like sutures in his skin. I don't even know. And I think once he like fully embodies cuz he seems like he's such a nice friendly kind of character, the whole movie kind of fades
Mhm.
into the background. I kind of forgot about him, honestly. And then they revealed he's the killer. And I'm like, whoa. And his whole personality, of course, completely changes. And he's just so theatrical and
Yeah.
over the top. Like you said, that's absolutely correct. But I think this setting really lends itself to that kind of like being melodramatic and whatnot.
He very much reminds me of Jim Carrey as the Riddler in Batman Forever.
Yeah.
And let me backpedal a little bit. I don't want you or anyone to think that I don't like him. I do.
Right.
Again, I love this movie. I just felt that, and again, I don't think it's necessarily his fault. With you, like I said, with you saying that this was a mess, it makes things make more sense to me now. It just like you said, like I just felt like there wasn't enough character development there, because like you said,
Yeah.
you don't want the fucking Scooby Doo red herring shit to happen in every movie. But like you said, he's just kind of this dude who just kind of blends into the background, and then poof, he's our villain, and as far as 0 to 60, and
Yeah, there's not a lot of, lead up to it or, like,
right,
hints that that's
what you get,
going on.
it's not bad. It's just it's a little bit jarring in a way, but I do think that he's a great movie villain. Don't get me wrong, I really
Yeah,
do like I like his look a lot too.
yeah. Oh, he looks great, yeah, I think what we'll find as we're digging into this a bit more that even though like we've said multiple times, we both really like this movie. It's clear that there was a lot of potential here that just wasn't tapped into for various production reasons.
Mhm.
I think maybe if this had had a bigger budget and less issues during production, it could have been even better, and maybe it would be like a huge hit that people still talk about to this day. You just never
Right.
know. But yeah, I mean, I think that's valid to say. Like I said, Toby as a character isn't interesting really until he's revealed to be the killer. I don't even really remember everything that he does before that.
So, I'm gonna ask you a question about Tom Dillard here in just a moment, because again, you've done research, I have not. So there is not many people in this movie that I don't know their history. However, he is one that all I know about him is, he did a lot of TV roles, and, he's no longer with us. He passed away, some time ago. But before we kinda get into his backstory, and, we've already, spoiler, that he ends up being the our villain, our killer of the movie. Isn't it weird, and again, you saying with production problems and stuff, that this movie kinda starts off as feeling almost like a Nightmare on Elm Street clone, and then
Yeah.
it starts tiptoeing around that, and then becomes something else entirely. Because, we've got Maggie, who is Jill Schoelen's character, having nightmares and visions of this creepy motherfucker, and then you realize once these guys are opening up this theater and getting things ready for the film festival, there's a creepy dude following them, so you're not sure what's going on, why she's having these dreams. But then I kind of feel like that all falls to the wayside, and now Toby's this killer who's got a completely kind of a different motive, and we never really touch upon why she was having nightmares and visions of this guy. It and again, I'm not ripping this movie because I love this movie. It's just things that I noticed this go around, like how things were established but then never fully fleshed out. One of those things that just really cracked me up was the fact that Maggie, Jill Schoelen's character, when she's talking to, I believe it was her love interest played by Derek Rydell, she gives like this like 5 minute long exposition of this guy that she's having nightmares about, and then 20 minutes later we find out that that's not who the killer is. And when we find out who the killer actually is, then the killer gives like another 10-minute long explanation of why he's doing what he does. And I'm like, we just killed 20 minutes of this fucking movie with exposition, and half of it didn't make sense and wasn't even needed. So it's weird. And like I said, a lot of stuff was introduced and not fleshed out. But you saying with production problems makes me understand that now. It makes it sounds kind of like, and I'm going to get like really nerdy and heady with some of my favorite movie stuff when I start spitting things. So forgive me, Katie, you might not know some of the shit that I'm mentioning here, but it almost reminds me a little bit of, and I don't know the stuff that happened behind the scenes. You haven't told me yet, but just from what I'm gathering, it almost comes off as one of my other favorite films, which is a movie called Spookies, which was a movie that was originally filmed by one group, and it was called, I believe, Tortured Souls. And then that movie was completely taken over by another group, and they added more scenes to it that didn't go with what was already shot, and it was retitled Spookies. And then you got this movie that is technically two movies in one, but they tried to pass it off as a coherent story. Am I somewhat on the right track here?
Um, no, so to be honest, I don't know a lot about like how if they had to do like sudden rewrites in the middle of the night or anything like that. It's more just like there were some mix ups with the cast and crew a little bit. Let's just say they changed things around
Gotcha.
when they were already like several weeks into production, and it kind of threw
Yeah,
everything
because
off for a while.
that's why it made, that's why I kind of use Spookies as my reference point, just
Yeah.
because like I said, with certain plots brought up in popcorn and then kind of dropped, it just kind of felt that way. That maybe it was meant to be
Yeah.
one thing and then turned into something completely different.
Yeah, I will say I love this movie, but if I
Same,
could
same.
have my if I could have my perfect way and just trying to think critically about it, it is a little I was a little disappointed that they set up this like kind of supernatural, fantastical, almost like you said, Nightmare on Elm Street esque story. Like I'm thinking, oh, it's the spirit of this guy, this who
Hmm.
made these films and killed his family and burned down the theater. So it's the spirit of him back for revenge, and they almost had this great connection by saying actually that's Maggie's real father,
Right.
and that's what happened. And but then they kind of like, yeah, that is true, but they kind of just like let it go and don't explore it anymore.
Yeah.
And then Toby is just like some kid that was in the theater that 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 just got burnt up in the fire, and so now he's got a grudge against film students. Now I don't really understand like the connection of him. I don't know who he's getting revenge on.
Right. He's mad at Maggie, and fuck it, folks. We're going full spoilers. He's
Yeah,
mad at Maggie because she was there, and
right.
her was it her mom or her aunt? I
Her
couldn't
aunt,
remember. Her yeah, was the
her Dee
one.
Wallace is her aunt.
Okay, so yeah, which was weird because they at first act like it was her mom, and then act like it was her aunt, and then just whatever. But yeah, so she I guess killed her, Maggie's dad and set fire to the place, which caused Toby's mom to get killed, and he escaped badly mutilated. So now he's getting revenge on Maggie and her aunt.
See, the basic synopsis of this plot makes sense, and is
Yeah.
pretty uncomplicated until you start getting into the nitty-gritty, and then it suddenly is a little bit more complicated.
So it's funny because again, uh, I've watched this movie several times, and those things have never really bothered me until I watched it today before we recorded because we're doing a podcast and talking about it in depth. And then
Yes.
I'm just like, shit.
Like, what is going on here?
There's some things that are a little muddy, but it's okay. And again, it is. It's okay. It's just us, diving in a little bit further into the movie. But I keep saying this. It's not a detriment. This movie's fucking awesome. Uh,
It's so much fun. Yeah, it's so awesome still. It just is a little quirky.
Yeah. So now let's jump back because I said I was going to ask you a little bit more about Tom Villard. Um, a little backstory maybe about him. You seem like you knew a little bit about him.
So I don't actually know a whole lot about his career as far as like his past. Like, I mean, I've got his IMDb up, and it's kind of like you said, he mainly just did a bunch of TV.
Hmm.
But the thing to know about him is that he did pass away in 1994 due to complications from AIDS,
Okay.
and he was one of the first actors to one be openly gay and say, yes, I am a gay man, and then two, to be open about him having AIDS. He like did this whole thing where he came on Entertainment Tonight and was like, hello, this is me, this is a reality, this is a literal like pandemic that is affecting my community, please somebody do something about it. And by all accounts he was a very kind and gentle and like loving human. Everybody that worked on that movie had nothing but glowing, incredible things to say about him. He was in the middle of battling AIDS while he was filming this, so he would have to sit with all that shit on his face for hours and hours and hours at a time while the DP was setting up every perfect shot perfectly, which we'll talk about more later too. And he had to keep it a secret because to say that you were an actor with AIDS at the time meant that you weren't going to work again. Nobody was going
Right.
to hire you. So he told Mark Harrier in confidence, hey, I think you should know just because of what we're doing that I have AIDS, but please don't tell anyone. And so he had to like keep his secret for him until he kind of came out and told everybody. So
Wow.
I think it's a shame because he was such a great actor. He's so good in this role, even if the role wasn't given quite enough meat.
Right.
But he took what he took on these challenges with production and then still came out with this pretty impressive, fun performance as a horror movie villain. So
Right.
I'm hoping that over time, I've been seeing some rumblings on Twitter about this movie lately, and so I'm hoping that it's starting to now have its renaissance, its time where it finally solidifies itself in horror history and people can respect his performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Rest in peace, Tom Villard. Like, again, over the top, but for God's sakes, there's no way you can take your eyes off of him. It's a shame that we could.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a shame we couldn't have, got more performances like that. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna move along to somebody else in the cast that whenever I have a chance to talk about this person, I fucking go balls deep because I fucking love this person so much, and I've been blessed to spend some time with this person in real life. So let's talk about Dee Wallace. I
Oh, D.
My God.
Wallace.
So this is funny because we're bringing up again how Popcorn is not a movie that you hear a lot of horror fans talk about, and I'm gonna do a hot take. I don't know if this is technically a hot take for everybody, but I feel like it is. Jamie Lee Curtis was recently given like the prestige of like greatest scream queen of all time or some shit like that. I forget what the actual
Mhm.
thing was that she just received. I love Jamie Lee Curtis. You know that. My friends know that. Everybody knows I love Jamie Lee Curtis. Unhealthy amount so. But I think Dee Wallace is the greatest scream queen because
Ooh.
oh yeah, I know a hot yeah, hot take coming in. Um Dee Wallace has wore her badge with fucking pride and honor her entire fucking career.
Yes.
And people tend to forget that Jamie Lee Curtis, after once Trading Places hit, and she showed off her tatas and started getting
That
bigger
was
and
it.
better things. That's all she wrote, baby, and she was off that horror movie train, fucking breakneck speed. And
Yep.
she kind of treated horror almost as like a dirty word, and one way or another, and because her career took off, and she did bigger and better things. But now that she's gotten older, the roles have kind of slowed down. She embraced horror again, and now she's back in the horror spotlight with the new
Mhm.
revamping of the Halloween series and everything. And everybody was just like, "Oh, Jamie's back." Well, let me tell you what, folks. Dee Wallace fucking came through the doors, and she has stayed there, and she has wore that badge with fucking honor, and she is fucking amazing in everything she's in. I could sit here and just fucking list every horror movie she's been in, but I would be here all night. But it's funny, she was in The Howling, and we just got done talking about some of the Howling series, Critters. Of course, E.T.'s not a horror movie, but she's a mom from E.T. But she's done so much in the horror movie world, and she still does. She is
Yeah.
still rocking and
Isn't she in
rolling.
Cujo? Oh
Yeah,
my
oh yeah,
gosh, yes, she's in
yeah.
Cujo.
She's the mom in Cujo, and like I said, to
Oh
this
my god.
day, she is still rocking them out. She's done a lot of work with Rob Zombie. She was in the
Mhm.
Halloween remake. She was in Lords of Salem. Uh, she's just and she does like a lot of the lower budget stuff nowadays. She not only is a
She's
fan,
a fucking legend, though.
she is a
She like,
fucking
her
legend.
IMDb, you gotta scroll for, like, a solid, like, 10 to 20 seconds to get to the bottom of her IMDb because she has done
Yeah,
so much shit. Like she is
yeah,
working constantly. And I feel like I really like her in this movie. Well, I like her in everything I've seen her in, but I really like her in this movie. I wish she'd been utilized a little bit more. I
Yeah, I got
think
that right
her
down.
scene in the theater where she thinks she's going to confront what's his name?
Toby.
Landon something, the or no
Oh,
well,
the
she's confronting Toby, but she thinks she's confronting this guy that she thought she killed
um,
15 years ago.
shit, I can't think of the name. It was,
I'll tell you, it's like Landon something.
it's,
It's, du 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 du
you're
du
you're
du
close.
I'm so close. Wow, hold on, we can cut this out. Lanyard Gates. It's
Lanyard,
Lanyard
lanyard.
Gates.
That's right, 'cause, when I first heard it, I'm like a lanyard that you fucking wear around your neck?
Yeah, what a name. But, there's that great scene where she goes and confronts him at the theater at night with the gun, and the lighting is just so good, and she's just so good. Like, I don't know, the camera just loves her. Like, she just is perfectly at home on screen, and
So
she's a fucking legend.
so look, I've got my notes. D. Wallace, underutilized. So you're
Ha!
100% like, she needed way more screen time. However, I wanna bring this up because, you know how the kids nowadays say, things hit different?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've grown up watching Dee Wallace, okay? I've probably I'm not gonna count, like, a lot of the newer stuff because she's in a lot of stuff, more recent, but I've seen everything that she's done from the '70s on up until, like, mid-2000s, okay? There's probably not a horror movie that I've
Mhm.
not seen her of hers. And things hit different now because when I was a kid, she was the mom. She was the horror mom or the monster mom.
Yeah.
She was always like, just the cute, lovable mom in those types of movies. Sometimes she'd be like a semi badass, but she was always like that motherly figure. Of course,
Mhm.
now I'm 37 years old and things hit different because I was watching Popcorn today and I was like, God damn, D. Wallace. Honey, you were
Right? That's a
fucking
hot
fine.
mom.
My God, and like,
She's such a babe.
yes, and it's funny because, it's completely different that she's got, like, this short super short brown hair when we, usually know her for her, her blonde hair and everything, but she's got, like, this super short,
Yeah.
kinda high and tight, haircut with the brown, but she's, like, coming in looking strong, like Rambo-ing, like, some shit up, and, I was like,
Yes.
I have never thought that Dee Wallace would hit me that way, but my god, then I started thinking back of other movies, I was like, "Shit, I've gotten older and my taste has changed." Dee Wallace is a fucking MILF.
Her character itself is so badass too, which is why it's a shame she's not in it more because she is she's introduced as kind of being this mom figure, which in a lot of movies the mom kind of fades in the background as the
Right,
plot progresses and as the main characters kind of come into their own. But she's just such a badass. She's like, "Oh yeah, like I killed this guy who was trying to kill my niece and I took her and I raised her as my own and oh, I heard he's back. Better get my gun and go take it to this theater in the middle of the night to confront him."
right.
Like that's insane.
And I love how it's almost like a bait and switch. It's like they knew, that there was gonna be audience members that knew that she was always the mom in these types of movies, so they cast her in that role for you to be like, "Oh, it's Dee Wallace playing the mom again." Then the next thing you know, she's fucking loading rounds in the fucking revolver and going to the fucking theater, and it's just like, "Fuck yeah, here we go."
Yeah. It's like she had no fear. Like that's what I really liked about that character. And that's kind of what I liked about Maggie too cuz you can see that character that Suzanne D. Wallace's character definitely raised Maggie cuz obviously Maggie is the appropriate amount of being afraid,
Right.
but she's not like hysterical. Like she keeps her wits about her. She tries to like she's trying to like outsmart Toby and all this stuff. And so I it's very cool to see some, like, badass ladies leading this movie for sure.
Absolutely, and like I said, I've got in my notes, a couple people were underutilized, and then I put character development, in all capital letters because what we do get with Suzanne and Maggie's characters is so good. There just needed to be more of it. This movie, usually 9 times out of 10, when we talk about movies, it always comes up with people. That movie could have been 15, 20 minutes shorter. This movie, I think, would have benefited from being maybe 20 minutes longer. Um,
Yeah, I wouldn't have hated it.
yeah, I mean, I like Jill Schoelen's character not only because she's got a really good vulnerability to her. She's pretty. She's a great final girl. There's just I just wish she had more. Again, Dee Wallace, fucking sexy, ready to kick ass. Just wish she needed. She just needed just a little bit more. All these characters needed a little bit more. Um, so we've got those guys out. We've got our villain out of the way. We've got our two leading ladies out of the way. Let's move along to Derek Rideout, who was basically Maggie's love interest for the movie. What did you think about him?
Um, he's pretty funny. I mean, he all these characters are pretty entertaining to watch, and they all had really great chemistry with each other because, like in real life, they all got along pretty well. So I think that definitely benefited the movie. I think as a character, I mean, he doesn't stick in my memory too much as a character for me. It's not like he really like stood out much. But I thought it was interesting. I kind of like that there's no like like romance or like actual love interest. It's kind of like he's trying to date Maggie and she's too busy working on a script to like give time to him, which I think is badass. Like that's so cool. And then he's just such an idiot. Like he's just bringing that other girl to the theater, like the theater to the film festival that the girl that he's been trying to get with is producing, and then he just flubs it up so bad. But I don't know.
I don't know. I feel like it's maybe a little bit of real life tactics into that part, just
Yeah,
because
that's fair.
I feel like everybody
I
at
mean,
one
he
point.
does save the day.
Yeah, he does. I feel like everybody at some point has been trying to hit on Mac on a significant other, or another person, and maybe they're not receiving it in return, so they grab another piece of arm candy to try to entice a little bit of jealousy. And
Yeah.
I gotta say, I didn't really hate that because it felt genuinely real, like
Oh,
something.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
only thing I do wish, and again, this is going to be a broken record moment of this episode, is underutilized. Not that he was, because I feel like he actually had a lot to do. I just felt that his character development was kind of piss poor, because we're supposed to be really
Yeah.
super invested into him saving the day and saving Maggie and taking on Toby and shit. And he's going through all these different like shenanigans, with getting locked out of the theater and running around the theater, getting chased by unseen Doberman, all this kind of shit, all these like little zany antics that that's trying to build him up as the hero, and it just kind of falls flat for me. I Even though he's supposed to be our I guess, for lack of a better term, hero,
I guess.
he's the only one
Yeah.
that I technically, I don't hate him. I just think he's my least favorite of our ensemble cast.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. It's not, and the actor I think he did a really good job. He's a good actor. And like you said, the character itself isn't bad. It just felt like they didn't really do enough to establish him as a main character and not just a side character, you know? Like
Right.
I feel like when all of a sudden he saves the day at the end, it feels almost a little like almost shoehorned in. Like I think it would have been cooler
Yeah.
if Maggie had followed in Dee Wallace's badass footsteps and just been the one to really defeat Toby. And it's not, I not that I have a problem with, somebody other than the final girl being the one to get the killing blow. I just think this in this particular case it wasn't quite as interesting as maybe it could have been.
Oh, absolutely agree with that. I really feel that it should have been a team effort between Dee Wallace and Jill Schoelen's characters have taken. I keep wanting to say taking Eric down, and the reason I keep wanting to say Eric and not Toby is because Derek Rydell was in because he was in Phantom of the Mall, which was called Eric's Revenge, and there's a lot of parallels and similarities between those two movies. But anyway, sorry. But yeah, I feel like Dee Wallace and Jill Schoelen should have definitely taken Toby out. They had the backstory, they had the history. Dee Wallace was the badass. and I think it would have been a better swan song.
So I had one character. I more wanted to talk about the actor himself and not just the character, but it's the character of Leon, played by Elliot Hurst. And Elliot Hurst and his family are basically the reason this whole movie happened.
Oh,
If you'll notice, if you're watching it, you'll see that last name Hertz pop up a lot. Hurst, excuse me, Hurst pop up a lot in the credits. And it's because he was from what I can only assume is a pretty wealthy family. And he had an interest in acting and in film. And his parents were very supportive of this. And they had a lot of various business ventures. And they'd produce Broadway plays and other things like that. They were super into the arts, so they just decided, well, fuck it. I guess we'll produce a movie and we'll put our kid in it.
nice.
So yeah, so his mom is the executive producer, and some other people in his family were producers and like worked on it and stuff. So I just think that's kind of a cool fact that, and he's not even the main character, which I think is extra cool. Like I feel like a lot of people who, especially, you know, with nepotism, it's like you put your kid in your movie, they're going to be the main character. But I think it's
Right.
kind of cool that he's just kind of a side character and he just gets to be kind of like one of the comic reliefs. And he has a great death scene also.
Yeah, I really actually like his character. I didn't know jack shit about him. I'd never seen him in anything else, so I had nothing else to go off of. But yeah, I generally like his character. He's got a lot of great moments. So it might have been, that he wasn't the lead, but he got some of the best moments
He gets some
because
funny
he's
yeah.
yeah, it's a lot of great parts. I can't remember the exact line, but when he's dressed up in because everybody's just so people listening understand what the hell we're talking about. Um, all of our main characters dress up in costumes when when they're putting on this film festival. But his character, when he's dressed up in his white straight jacket with the white hair, he was something about like looking like a fucking snow cone. And
Yeah.
I died laughing at that line. And I don't want to spoil every fucking thing, but the bathroom scene I thought was
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, that's a really fun scene. I think having like the mechanic of a killer that can assume the face of anybody is
Mhm.
really interesting.
It
And
is, and
so
I can't wait till we talk about the effects because of how they handled that. Also, was really well done. But yeah,
oh, cool. I'm excited to hear more about that. They didn't get too into that part in the documentary. So other than just it was a lot of prosthetics and it took a long time to put on and all that.
cool. Um, let's some of the more minor characters. Um, so what do you think of Malcolm Denar's character of Bud, the wheelchair ridden character?
Yeah, he's a lot of fun. He's definitely was a really funny character. He felt like a real person to me. He felt like somebody that I would meet in class, maybe at college, and that I would get along with. And I really liked that. I think he got one of my favorite death scenes in this movie, though. I feel like it was it was way more, it almost felt almost like Saw in a way, like, the way he was, like, tied to that chair, and it was like, when this light goes off, then it'll be this, and then you'll get electrocuted," and he's just gotta sit there, and I really felt like I was rooting for him, like, I really, even though I knew deep down, I was like, "This is definitely his death scene, and he's definitely gonna die," I was really rooting for him and hoping that he would, be able to reach the cord in time to unplug it before it electrocutes him, so I think that's just a testament to a good character. He just seemed real enough and sympathetic enough that I didn't want him to die, even though I kind of knew he was fated to die.
Right. So I too liked his character, and whenever you put a person in a wheelchair in a horror movie, you kind of automatically get sympathy points, except for Franklin and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Fuck that fucker.
Yeah.
But no, this character of Bud, absolutely, I really really liked him. He's lovable, but I also have to tip my hat to the actor. Again, Malcolm, I believe it's pronounced Daenerys. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that.
Hmm.
Um, because He goes from one horror movie where I absolutely fucking hate him and cheer for his goddamn death to a movie like this where just like, aw, I hate that he died. But yeah, he was the fucking asshole, one of the asshole of Buddy Repperton's gang and Christine, and
Oh my I'm just now seeing that on IMDb, and I
yeah,
had no idea.
and it's funny when I remember when I first watched Popcorn, I recognized him right off the bat, and I immediately had that feeling of, oh, that motherfucker. So,
Yeah.
so I was like, "Oh, this fucking yeah." I already hated him because even though it was never specifically said in the movie which one of Buddy Repperton's gang shit on the dashboard of Christine, but you know it was him.
It was him.
It was him.
It was him.
But
Yeah.
but no, I like him in this movie, and again, good actor. I dig it.
Yeah, I liked him a lot. Again, I feel like one of the reasons why I agree with you that this movie should have been about 20 or 30 minutes longer is that I feel like we could have gotten a little bit more time, not only with our main cast, but with all of these side characters because
Yeah,
they all had such great chemistry together and they all really got along in real life. And so you really see that on the screen. But I feel like there were could have been way more scenes to just
yeah.
give us a little bit more character development and made us care about them a little bit more.
It's
Because
not.
once he dies, it's kind of like everybody else. I don't know. You just kind of stop caring about everybody at one point, and I really wanted to feel like I was like rooting for everybody.
It's which is rare for a horror movie because usually your ensemble cast is their fodder. They're they're just lined up at the slaughterhouse ready to get butchered by your movie villain, and we don't really give a shit. And it's rare for a movie to make you kind of feel different. You root for these people, and you
Mhm.
genuinely like. I mean, I genuinely liked everybody in this movie. The only person that fell flat for me, again, Derek Riddle's character, like, I liked him enough. I just didn't think he was worthy of the
Yeah.
final kill. I liked him enough, but the only character that fell flat was the blonde chick. The only thing, like, every time I see her on screen, all I can think of is A League of Their Own because she was one of the on the baseball team.
Because of her costume?
No, no, she was actually in A League of Their Own.
Oh, really? I
Yeah.
actually didn't wait, are you talking about Kelly Jo Minter?
No, no,
Oh,
the
no,
the blonde
the other
chick,
blonde girl.
not the nurse, but the other blonde, the one that gets. I think
Right.
she's like the first kill, maybe, or second kill.
Yeah, 'cause oh, c right, 'cause she puts on the black wig, like,
Yeah,
very
yeah,
early on in the movie, so I forget that she's actually blonde.
yeah.
Um, yeah, that character I would have liked to have seen more of because they try to say I can't remember exactly, I watched this, like, 2 or 3 days ago, I can't remember exactly where in the movie they say it, but they mention something about her maybe they actually mentioned it in the behind the scenes documentary. I don't remember. They mentioned something about her character being like kind of like the bimbo of the group,
Well,
but
she's
like
fucking the
I didn't really
professor.
get that. What? Oh,
She's
right. She's
fucking the
sleeping with the
professor.
professor. That's right. Oh my god. Okay,
Yeah.
never mind that tracks. So I was about to say, where do they introduce that? Yeah. So I mean, that'd be that's like the only thing, and to me, it's kind of she's kind of one of the only characters that feels like a very classic slasher character in the sense that
Absolutely.
she's being naughty, she's breaking the rules a little bit, so she's got to die. And in this case, it's not just premarital sex, it's premarital sex with your professor who's much older than you, which is kind of creepy.
Yeah, it's funny, because like I said, she's the only one that falls flat for me because she just it's like she's there, she looks good, we find out that she's fucking the professor, she dies. Like, that's literally beat for
Yeah.
beat what happens to her. There's nothing really fun. But I do wanna talk about, film school professor, which is played by Tony Roberts, who,
Yes.
who, of course, is from, 2 great, well, I shouldn't say 2 great, 1 great movie and 1 movie that other people will know of. He was in, of course, Serpico with Pacino, which is a fucking fantastic film, and he was also in one of my favorite Amityville movies, Amityville 3D. But of course, like, Tony Roberts has also got a fucking resume, fucking 5 miles long. Dude's been in a lot of stuff. He's one of those actors that he's just got that face where he just looks like your friend's dad, and
Yeah.
he's just that's just kind of mannerisms too, and it's always good to see him in a movie. And he didn't really have a whole hell of a lot to do in this movie, but he was definitely a welcomed addition for sure. But yeah, Tony Roberts, love seeing him in the movie. I also want to point out two fucking great cameos in this movie. Um, One of them, of course, is the late great Ray Walston, who many of you might know as Mr. Hand from Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Pappy Popeye from the Popeye movie, and of course my favorite Martian. He kind of, he's in the movie for like all of like fucking 5 minutes, but it's talk about somebody that's always great to see in a movie. He pops up as this guy, like I forget what they call him, like Professor M or Captain M or some shit like that. But he's like this guy who owns like a movie memorabilia prop store, and he's
Oh, yeah, that
basically
guy is great.
yeah he's the guy that supplies these film students with all their props and decorations to decorate this movie theater for their horror film festival. But yeah, it was great seeing him. And then the other weird cameo, which I never noticed until today when I was watching it again. Um, I do want to talk about more of this in depth a little bit, later. But of course, the film festival that these guys are putting on consists of three movies that they show at the theater, and they're basically movies within a movie. These are not real life movies. These are movies that were shot specifically for this film. But let me tell you what, these three movies look fucking fantastic, and I would watch them any day of the week. We've got
Oh, yeah.
it was Mosquito, the Electrified Man, and the Stench, I think is what it was. So yeah, so the second movie, The Electrified Man, um, which is basically a riff on The Indestructible Man, starring Lon Chaney Jr., about an inmate at a prison who sent the electric chair and survives, and he's can electrocute people and shit. Almost like Ernest Goes to Jail in a way. Anyway, uh, that character that's in that movie within the movie, Electrified Man, is none other than Crispin Glover's father,
Whoa!
and
Cool.
they look fucking identical
Oh
because
my god, now that you say it, it's so
yeah,
obvious.
yes, because it's funny because when I watch those movies before, you think of Crispin Glover no older than maybe like the Willard movie, but now I watch it, I know what Crispin Glover looks like now. uh, you know,
Yeah.
some 20 years maybe after Willard. So he's got more age on him. So now when I see like his dad, which would be around the age that Crispin is now, it's like, holy shit, that looks just like Crispin Glover. But yeah,
That's amazing.
when I was watching it, I was like, that looks like Crispin Glover. Is that his dad? So then at the ending credits, of course, it said, whatever his dad's name is. I just saw Glover. I was like, ah, fuck, it's got to be.
That's so cool. I love all those movies within the movie. It really adds a nice touch to
So
this movie
good.
as a whole. Like,
So
it's
good.
really charming. And then let's see. There's 2 other kinda side characters in this group of kids I just wanted to point out really quick. So we've got Kelly Jo Minter as Cheryl and then
Yeah.
Yvette Solar as Joni.
I love Kelly Jo Minter. I mean, she's got a decent catalog of films, but she's just one of those people that I wish there was more of, more movies.
Yeah, she's so fun to watch. I was
I
hoping
love
she'd be
her.
more prominent in this movie too, but
Yeah, because she has a decent list of some favorites. She was in A Nightmare on Elm Street Part Five,
yep.
um, People Under the Stairs, and of course one of my all-time favorite movies. This is technically not a horror movie, but horror lovers love this movie, and that's Summer School, starring Mark Harmon.
Oh,
And
summer school is
yeah,
so
and of
fun.
course, us horror fans love that movie because of Dave and Chainsaw, the two Texas Chainsaw
Mhm.
Massacre loving goofballs of the movie. But yeah, Kelly Jo Minter definitely one of those characters that are character actors that you love to see. She always plays a lovable part because she's never the main character, but she's always the main character's best friend, and is always kind of like that bad bitch that's got her best friend's back. So I love that
Yeah.
about her, and it's funny. I wrote down raspy. The reason I wrote down raspy is because um, maybe people don't want to know this about me, but a big turn on for me is when a chick has like a kind of a raspy voice, and I love
Yeah.
that this movie
She's got a
has
great voice.
yeah, and I love that this movie has 2 great chicks with raspy voices. Of course, Jill Schoelen, who I think has, like, such a, like, sexy, like, raspy voice, and then, Kelly Jo Minter, who's got that same kinda raspiness. So, you
Yeah.
if you can give me some badass raspy babes in my horror movies, you automatically get an extra point.
Yeah, she's great to listen to, and again, it just kinda goes back to what I keep saying is that I just wish there was more of her. I feel like there I don't even remember what the last point we see her, but she kinda, like, fades into the background pretty, like, midway through the movie, and then we
Yeah.
don't really see her again as far as I know. I'm trying to refresh my memory here, but I don't think we really see her again. So,
She,
yeah, I just another character I wish we'd seen more of.
she shows up, I guess you could say when needed, but she doesn't
Yeah.
yeah, she doesn't play a pivotal role. However, it's funny because maybe I'm wrong in this, but I feel like every horror movie that I just listed that she's in, she fucking survives.
That I would need to double check that, but that may actually be true.
Um, so because she
And
survived this,
she survived this one too. I thought that's what I think is kinda cool about this movie is that not every single but like, no not everybody in this group dies. They don't, like, just go through one by one, killing everyone systematically.
right?
So, yeah. She also I'm looking her up. She also was, like, a clerk in the Lost Boys working at Max's video store.
Oh, okay. The two biggest things that if I had made this movie that I would have done differently, one of them we'll talk about a little bit later because I don't want to spoil. But one of them definitely is the body count because that's just how I am. I love fucking body count. This movie,
Yeah.
while there is some, I'm surprised at how many people make it out alive. You've got an entire theater, and I'm not talking like like a fucking present day Cinemark or Regal theater. I'm talking about like fucking massive, old school opera type theater that this film festival is being held at, packed full of people. And if it was one of my movies, man, it would be like a goddamn massacre where people are being mowed down left and right. But the audience, they all fucking survive. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that could have been interesting if more because the audience just really doesn't know what's going on like the whole time, which I think is kind of funny.
yeah,
I did want to just round up this talk about characters really quick with one more character in this group of kids. The actress's name is Yvette Soler or
yeah,
Soler. I'm not sure how she pronounces it.
a nurse,
She has not been in a whole lot. Like
which
this
is
is
a
kind
shame.
of her main yeah, it's her main thing, and it was one of the first roles that she got, like, right out of film school, so it's a shame that she didn't work more. I mean, she's done some TV, but she hasn't really done much since 1995, so, I mean, I
Oh
hope
wow.
and I hope that's a good thing. I hope that she's, very happy doing whatever she's doing now, but I do think she was really fun to watch in this movie, and I really liked her character. I really liked all of her outfits. Her clothes were really like quirky and interesting looking, and her hair was just like super cute, and she was just funny. So, again, being a broken record, just another character I wish I'd seen a little bit more of. But I think that pretty much kind of rounds out our cast of characters here.
Yep. And again, what a great cast, honestly.
Yeah, it's a great cast. Great group of kids, which kind of leads me into I would love to talk about the production of this movie a little bit and some of the shit that went down.
Yeah, there was a couple more things I want to touch on, but I can't really wait much longer. I gotta hear about some of these production problems.
Yeah, okay. So, I mentioned that Elliot Hurst, who played the role of Leon, his family kind of spearheaded the getting the production up in this movie.
Hmm.
And apparently, and they're really vague about it in the documentary, so unfortunately I don't know all of the dirty details about everything, but basically his family, whoever was helping to produce this movie, they were talking to a businessman in Jamaica who was trying to make Jamaica a new filmmaking hotspot for like Americans and Europeans. So
Which
he
makes so much
somehow
sense.
pulled all.
It makes so much
Yeah,
sense now because of the the
it's why there's reggae music.
yeah, this random Jamaican reggae band that just kinda pops their head in for, like, 5 minutes. But yeah, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, so, so long story short, they secure the location in Jamaica and they fly everybody out. What's interesting is that the role of Maggie was not always Jill Schoelen. It was actually originally an actress named Amy O'Neill, who hasn't been in a whole lot of stuff, but she's one of the kids in Honey I Shrunk the Kids, which was a couple years before this came out. So she'd been working a little bit, and they don't go into a whole lot of details about why or like what led up to this, but basically they get 3 weeks into this production. They've got Amy O'Neill playing Maggie. They've got Alan Ormsby, who wrote the script, directing. And the producers and kind of a lot of the people behind the scenes, they're looking at the dailies and they're just like, this is not working. This is not good. The direction is really bad, and our lead actress is just not doing it.
We got the Back to the Future syndrome.
Yeah, and a little bit of a little bit of like some poltergeist stuff with kind of two directors trying to trying to do this. But so and I think what it was is that from what I remember from watching this documentary, Alan Ormsby was not a director, he was a writer. But he
Mhm.
really wanted to try his hand at directing, and I think he was just so laid back that he wasn't getting the performances that the producers wanted to see, and he was really into the black and white movies that they were making, like the movies within a movie that they were making, and he was
Right.
spending too much time on those but not giving enough direction and attention to his main cast of characters. and
Wow.
and everybody was like, okay, we're not making these movies, these are part of this whole other movie that we're making. So they ended up firing him, and they also fired Amy O'Neill. Again, I don't know the exact circumstances that led up to this, but they
Mhm.
both got fired around the same time. So they flew in Mark Harrier, whatever. They flew him in, and then Jill Schoelen has a great story. She was on set wrapping up another movie, and her agent comes and is like, "Hey, we have this role in a horror movie in Jamaica. The only catch is you have to leave on a plane tomorrow." And it was like 4 p.m.
Oh, wow.
So she kind of had to just take a leap of faith and just fly into Jamaica. Kind of same thing with Mark Harrier. He hadn't read the script. He didn't really know what it was about. He said he showed up on set and they were in the middle of doing a scene, and he literally like directed Tony Roberts doing like a motion. He had to direct a shot without reading the script or knowing anything that was going on. And
Holy
then they
shit.
broke for lunch and he was like, okay, now I need to go watch all the dailies so I can understand what is actually going on. So the majority of the scenes that feature Maggie had already been shot with Amy O'Neill, and they didn't have time or money to go do and reshoot everything. So they reshot what they could, like the scene with them in the classroom and whatnot was completely redone. But a lot of the scenes with Maggie, they just did inserts. Like they just went back and just like shot Jill Schoelen, like her side of the conversation. So she had to
Holy
act by
shit.
herself a lot, and she didn't get to actually like interact with a lot of these other characters on camera at the same time, except for in very specific scenes.
Oh,
So
wow.
I think that definitely leads into why it feels like her character doesn't really have a lot to do, because she didn't get a lot to do because she was just getting like tacked on at the end there. Um, and so a one really funny story about Mark Harrier, about this production. So you've got that scene at the beginning where they introduce all of the characters. They're in the classroom, and he'd watched the dailies from when they'd shot it originally and it was really bad. And then he went and, directed the scene again, and it was still, he just wasn't getting what he needed out of these actors. And apparently he really set them straight and was like, look, I know you guys think you're on a vacation in Jamaica, but there's not too many opportunities one has in life to make a movie. So we should probably focus on making this movie and making it good, because this sucks right now.
Oh, nice. Nice.
And so apparently that scared everybody enough to kind of whip them into shape, and they were able to perform a lot better. So that, that's really kind of the main thing I know about the production, and it really influenced my opinion of it after watching it, because all of those kind of weird, quirky things that didn't quite make sense kind of makes sense now when you consider the fact that they were completely changing their lead actress and their director 3 weeks into their shoot. And yeah, so I don't know.
Crazy.
It was a bit of a mess.
So, again, this is all fucking new to me, and that's really interesting, honestly. Wow, that's talk about being
Yeah.
just fucking thrown into a storm, man.
Yeah, and there was a lot of tension between Mark Harrier and the rest of the crew, because the rest of the crew had been there the whole time, and they were like, "Who
Right.
is this new guy coming in? Like, he's got to prove himself." And one little funny tidbit, you and I have both worked with DPs, with directors of photography. We've
Hmm.
both been on set. We kind of know we just know some of the stereotypes about directors of photography are true, in that they take forever to set up a shot.
Right.
And this particular director of photography was Ronnie Taylor, who I found out was Dario Argento's DP on Opera in
Oh,
1987, which is so cool. So he's this amazing, artistic visionary cinematographer. And Mark Harrier was very much like, we're on a schedule, we're on a budget, we gotta go, I don't care, just like, can we please shoot the scene? And at one point there's like this funny thing where, like, the guy who plays Toby, Tom Villard's in all this makeup, he's secretly
battling AIDS.
suffering from AIDS and
Yeah.
trying to keep it a secret. He's got all this shit on his face, he's been there for hours, and they're sitting there and they're waiting for Ronnie Taylor and his crew to just like light this scene perfectly. And it was just like a quick little scene, like it was like the last thing they had to do for the day. And Mark Harrier is like, come on, we gotta go, can we please just shoot it? And they have this little back and forth, and finally Ronnie Taylor was like, well, fine, but it won't look good. Which is such a DP response.
And like working on enough movies and working with some DPs that I like and some that I'll never fucking work with again. I'm not going to say that either party is wrong. Honestly, the difference is
Yeah.
you have it's a very specific type of movie, and movies like popcorn. It's a blessing it turned out as awesome as it did, because those types of horror movies are made a dime a dozen on purpose. They're quick, low budget, get them into the theater and make a quick buck and move along. So you've got you probably half your crew, especially Mark Harrier, who just got fucking thrown into this mix out of nowhere, working on this specific type of horror movie, who's just trying to stay on schedule, get the motherfucker done, and then you know that's that's 100% right. I mean that's the headspace that he's in, and it's not a wrong headspace. But then you've got the
Yeah.
DP, who has a background in a very different specific type of horror film. Like you said, opera. That's one of my favorite Argento films, and it's beautiful cinematography. And you can get that type of cinematography on a movie like say like Friday the 13th. You don't get that, because it's a
Right.
completely different mindset. And so DP, he's just doing what he knows, and then the director's just doing what he knows. And I think that's where a lot of clashing comes on sets,
Hmm.
is when the director and the DP might have a general admiration for each other and the project that they're on, but they're probably approaching it from two different avenues that don't necessarily work well. Both avenues are leading to the same goal, but one route is a little bit different than the other. But with you saying that they had to fire Alan Ormsby and bring in another one, that's also probably a little telling that maybe the DP should take that, take that note and be like, ah, maybe we should hurry
Yeah.
it up. But yeah, that's really interesting. It's crazy that you tell about Alan Ormsby being fired. Do you happen to know why Mark Harrier was specifically chosen by any chance?
I don't know specifically why. I can't quite remember. It seems that he was at the time, an up and coming director. Let me see what
Well,
else
here's the
he's
reason why I ask
done.
if there's a
Oh, he done Porky's.
yeah, that's why I was
He
asking.
done
So look,
yeah.
so Bob Clark, who's no longer with us. Bob Clark, of course, did the original Black Christmas. He also did A Christmas Story, and he also did the Porky's movies. Um,
Yeah.
Bob Clark started off in film with Alan Ormsby, and their first movie was Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, which I believe Ormsby wrote and Bob Clark directed, and Ormsby I think was even the main guy in that movie. And I know that Ormsby wrote Porky's 2. And here's where it all gets really weird. Mark Harrier is well, I think the character's name is Billy. Is Billy
Yeah.
in all the Porky's movies. So it's like a little niche Bob Clark crowd here. You've got Alan Ormsby who works with Bob Clark on a bunch of movies. Alan Ormsby who writes Porky's 2, Bob Clark who directs all the Porky's movies, and then you've got Mark Harrier who stars in the Porky's movies. I was just wondering if maybe since Ormsby was getting fired, he was maybe like, "Hey, if you're letting me go, can you at least give this guy that I know a chance?" I didn't know if that was the case or not.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it was they don't talk a whole lot about Alan, honestly. They try I will say the Synapse Films documentary did a really good job at not leaning into like drama and gossip. So they make a point to not say directly like he was bad at directing and that's why we fired him. Like they I don't have a lot of details about how his exit went exactly.
Mhm.
I have a feeling it was just one of those. It was like this director's not working. We gotta fire him. We need a new director like right now. Who's available? Oh, I know this guy. He wants to direct. Let's fuck it. Like this. I feel like at that point they were like, this is doomed. So we might as
Right.
well just like try. I guess try anything.
It's really a shame because I don't like everything that Alan Ormsby has dished out. But I will say, I'm a fan of Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, which he wrote. Um, I'm a fan of Death Dream, which he wrote, which was also a Bob Clark film. But my favorite movie that Ormsby worked on was a movie that he both wrote and directed, which was a movie called Deranged, which is
Oh,
basically the real life story of Ed Gein, and it's kind of I think it's like the first movie to actually delve into the full Ed Gein story from beginning to end. I mean, you had your movie like Texas Chainsaw Massacre that was inspired by Ed Gein, but Deranged was actually about Ed Gein. Even though they didn't call him Ed Gein, it was 100% about him. Which, not to plug myself, not to give a shout out to my own fucking movies or whatever, but I just want to bring it back around to Alan Ormsby and Deranged. My very first movie, Bloodbath in Creightonville, aka the Creightonville Terror, the murderous hillbilly family in that movie is called the Cobb family, and I actually got that name from Deranged because the Ed Gein character in that movie, his name is Ezra Cobb. So I literally named one of my characters Ezra Cobb and the rest of the family the Cobb family. So that shows how much I
amazing.
actually love the movie Deranged, which, funny enough, was written and directed by Alan Ormsby.
Huh. Well, I'm glad that he continued to work and clear and did things that have clearly inspired new filmmakers. It's a shame that popcorn didn't work out for him. I feel like I got the sense watching this making of documentary, it felt like, I don't know, I could just feel, I felt so empathetic for not only Alan but for the other actress who they replaced with Jill Schoelen. I just feel like that's got to be such a blow, and it
Yeah.
just probably really sucks. But I'm glad to see that he kept on working and kind of grew from it. And yeah, I mean, and the movie still turned out good. So I mean, he still wrote it. So like, this movie that he wrote is turned
Well,
out to be pretty good.
also, I wanna throw out the fact that I wrote down in my notes right here, a lot of love went into the fake movies. And now that you're telling me that
Yes,
he was more focused on those instead of the actual
that would be why.
movie, it explains everything. Which that that also explains why I was so enthralled with them while watching the movie, because it's not that it took me out of the movie and made me think, "Oh, I'd rather watch those movies," but they were just so well done.
Mhm.
Especially like Mosquito, like that was a movie that it felt just like the 1950s giant bug movies. It was so awesome.
It's so fun. The only other thing that I really wanted to kind of circle back on regarding the production is, I really wanted to just hit home how great I think the cinematography in this movie is. Ronnie Taylor really did an amazing job. Specifically the scene with Dee Wallace where she goes into the theater. That's some of the coolest
Yeah,
lighting
it
in
is.
this whole movie. I'm a huge lighting nerd. I studied lighting, like theatrical lighting in college. And I love Dario Argento. I love when filmmakers take the time to really make their shots look interesting, and use lighting to really like provoke a mood and an emotion. So I think this movie nails it. Like, it's so moody. There's so really interesting use of shadow and light. So I just wanted to shout that out again because it's great. It really
It's not
is
very
cool.
often that I of course I own just about every horror movie you can possibly think of from the 70s, 80s, and 90s on VHS, and at any chance I'm given, that's usually what I'll watch those movies on. Uh, of course, I own a lot of DVDs and Blu-rays. It's not very often that I'll go out of my way to buy a Blu-ray of a movie. I'm just not, I'm set in my ways. I'm old school. I prefer the grit and grain of the old film look and VHS look. However, there is circumstances where I love Blu-rays. We plugged Synapse Films. There's other companies like Severin and companies like that. Vinegar Syndrome, which is another one of my favorite companies, that
Oh yeah.
they put out a lot of really, really great Blu-ray releases of obscure horror films. And I buy those Blu-rays, one, because I'm not shelling out $300 for the fucking VHS, and and two, they put together a great. Usually, it's always a great package all the way around. Great cover art. The transfers are always great. Stuff like that. But anyway, long story short, the reason I was brought this up is you've kind of convinced me that to pick up this Blu-ray of Popcorn, because you're talking about the cinematography and the lighting and stuff. And while you are 100% right, it does look amazing. You got to figure, me watching it on Blu-ray would probably open my eyes even more so, because of how I've always watched the movie. I've always watched it on VHS, so it's a lot of it's muted, and a lot of the
Yeah.
colors are drained out and stuff like that. So maybe I need to bite the bullet, get the Blu-ray for this one, and bask in the cinematography a little bit more.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely worth a watch. I mean, and like we were saying, this was my first time watching it, but I definitely experienced a similar thing going from watching Suspiria, just however I'd been watching it, and then watching this 4K restoration. It was like watching it for the first time again. So I'm like obsessed with it. So it's definitely, I'm nostalgic about VHS and old school media, but I think
Right.
it's great that they're taking these movies that you can't really find anywhere. Like popcorn was not streaming anywhere, even to rent.
Right.
And now I have this beautiful Blu-ray restoration of it
It it
forever,
it definitely
ostensibly.
needs to be seen. It needs to be out there. So
Yeah,
hopefully with Snap putting out a great Blu-ray, it'll get into more hands and get seen a
yeah.
little bit more.
I would love to talk about the effects and makeup in this movie, unless you had any other tidbits regarding the writing or the direction of this that you wanted to chat about.
No, not really. Of course, you bringing up the effects. I got a good little segue that we can just hop on a little segue and roll right into it. Um,
That little Segway train.
that little segue train, little seggy. Uh, this will bleed in. I just want to say that as much as I love the film festival, the movies within a movie that they have playing at the theater, I want to say that I loved the costume festival aspect to it where everybody showed up at this festival dressed in Halloween costumes and masks, and it is so great. And I think today when I was watching it, I got that little cheesy shit eating grin on my face when everybody started showing up at the theater because it took me back because this is 1991. I'm like 8 years old when this movie came out, and I remember Halloween in the '90s and the costumes and the mask and how they looked, and it
Oh
was like
yeah.
it was a really cool nostalgic trip because those costumes and masks were very of the era, and everybody's wearing it, and all I could think about was, I don't think we'll ever get those days back where you see just mass people and Halloween costumes, fucking loving it and just having a good time like they were. It was a really great scene, and I'm also going to lend a little bit to the. It was called Dreamland Theater, correct? The theater that they were showing the festival.
Yes.
Uh, Between the theater, the atmosphere, the props and decorations, and the people in the costumes. This is not a Halloween movie, of course. This is not a movie set during Halloween, but I might be adding it, even though I've watched it. This is probably like my 10th time watching it. I might put it into regular rotation during the Halloween season just because it gave that feel of uh of old
Yeah.
school nostalgic Halloweenness. So yeah, let's
Yeah.
roll that right into the makeup effects.
Yeah, I mean, I did just want to say, just kind of going off what you're saying, it has such a great vibe. I love that people just showed up in masks and it was like a Halloween thing that wasn't Halloween. And if anyone is listening that's under the age of 30, I want you to imagine that there was a time where it was perfectly legal for adults to just walk around in full on rubber masks that covered your whole face. Because I remember being a kid, being a teenager, and them announcing that you couldn't do that anymore. So it's kind
Yeah.
of sad. But yeah, so but as far as the effects and the makeup, I mean, I have to start with the main event here, which is Toby, our killer, his makeup. It's so interesting. I feel like I haven't seen a character that really looks like him before fully, even though I've seen, we have Freddy Krueger, we have other characters that are like burn victims or have these other like facial disfigurements, but
Right.
something about the way they did his makeup, it's like on one hand it's realistic enough to be like really unsettling, but on the other hand it almost looks like they just took like lunch meat and stretched it across his face, but I
It,
like it.
I would say interesting is the very best way to explain it. It's cool. It's a unique. I would say it's somewhat of a unique design. It's
Mhm.
uh it's like a burn victim, like you said, but with like those really weird, like they almost look like metal sutures that's like all over the face. The it almost reminds me a little bit, which is this movie came so much later, but it reminds me of just a hair of the Toby Hooper's remake of the Toolbox Murders. The character had like this weird like face that was like a face stapled onto his real face. Anyway, but it's a unique design, and I like how you say that on one hand realistic, but on the other hand, it's like a little cartoony. And I like it's got like a fine line between those two. But I would
Yeah. I think it has to do with, like, I mean, I'm not sure if this is what they're thinking, this is just what I'm thinking, looking back on it. It's almost like they wanted to make it's upsetting, but it's not so upsetting that you wanna look away. Like, he's kinda scary looking, but you can't take your eyes off of him, and that's also credit to just his performance in general, but, like, I think if they'd made that makeup too gory and, like, too disfigured, that he wouldn't have been as interesting to watch because people would have been, like, cringing every time he was on screen.
maybe. I do feel like they were trying to, I don't want to say piggyback because they did technically do their own thing, but I feel like it maybe just rode a little bit on the Freddy Krueger coattail a
Yeah, it
little bit.
probably did.
It was a little bit Krueger-esque, but I liked it. But I think the best thing about this character, and of course the makeup, is that yes, he's a burn victim, but the fact that he goes full Mission Impossible by wearing other people's faces. And it's not that he's then for people who has not seen this movie that's listening, it's not that he's like Leatherface. He's not cutting their faces off and wearing them. No, he's using literally movie magic where he's making molds of these people's faces and molding it to his life cast so he can masquerade as these people. And it's really cool. And like I said, it's like Mission Impossible, where the characters dress up as somebody else
Yeah.
to do their thing. But I really liked one thing about him wearing these different faces, and a lot of other movies where you see people doing that, where they're wearing somebody else's face as a disguise, blah blah. It's always 100% obvious that when as soon as they put the face on, it's that actor, playing
Right.
that part. But I really liked how in this movie, the when it would switch over to that actual actor, that they would do like little bitty like you could see little bitty seams around the edge of
Yeah.
their face, and there was like a little bit of a paler makeup on their face to give them a little bit more of a pasty look. It just enough for us to know that that's him wearing somebody else's face. And I like that nod. I like that they took it extras because they could have fucking cheated. They could have just said, "Oh fuck it," just bring in the other actor. But they took that extra step to make it look like it was him wearing the face.
Mhm. And he made a point to at least in the beginning when he first starts killing people, he made a point to kind of always stay kinda not in direct light, so he
Right,
wasn't, so it was enough to trick the other characters, but the audience could see from another angle the seam on the side of his cheek and see that it
right.
was, like, ripping up a little bit, and you're like, "Oh, no, that's not him."
I really enjoyed the part where he's mimicking the professor character, where
Yeah.
yeah, where he kisses the hot blonde from League of Their Own, and I guess like
Yeah.
his lips, since it's a prosthetic, it sticks to her lips, and when she pulls away, it's all like latex and stringy and pulling away from his face. Such a great shot and a
It's
great
so
scene on that.
gross, but yeah, it looks great. I love that they did that. Yeah, I think at that point in the movie, I hadn't fully figured out that he was making, like, molds of their faces. I
Mhm.
thought he was doing, like, a Texas Chainsaw, cutting their face off and wearing it, so that made it even more disgusting to me at first until she rips it off and it's clearly latex, but when they
Right.
kiss, I was like, "Oh, you're kissing his dead face
Yeah.
lips, no."
I wish they maybe had again. That's been our theme of this episode. Was I wish they had done a little bit more, but I do wish that maybe there had been a little bit more backstory to him making the faces because he has this whole
Yeah.
crazy cool setup in his lair where he's got like his vacuum like a vacuum forming machine that's like making the imprint and like the latex and all this kind of cool kooky shit that he's got together to make these masks, but it's never explained how, why he's learned this technique, or we know he's a we know that he's technically a film student with the rest of them, but we never get the idea that maybe he's like an effects artist or he knows how to do this shit. So I wish they maybe had played on that a little bit more.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the theme of this episode is just we liked it, but we'd love to have more.
Which is a good thing if you love a movie enough that you just want more of it.
Yeah, that's true. You got to keep them one more.
So I I don't I don't do research. Maybe I should start doing that. I don't know who was in charge of the effects team. The only people that I know that worked on it, and again, I think I say this every episode so far. There's always a much bigger team, so I apologize to anybody listening that might get mad that I don't mention somebody else, but people that I do know that worked on it, of course, one of my favorite effects artists, Wayne Toth, who was on the team. I don't know exactly what he was in charge of or what specific effects that he
He
did on it, but he, of course,
They just have him credited as special effects makeup effects artist. Yeah.
yeah, so I don't know exactly what it did, but of course Wayne Toth, he's done so fucking much. He started off as a K and B boy and worked his way up to his own stuff. I mean, he's Rob Zombie's go to guy. Like he has done
Oh,
all of
cool.
yeah, he's done all the effects work on all of Rob Zombie's films. He did Puppet Master 5, John Carpenter's Vampires, Spawn. So I mean, he's done a lot of a lot of great effects movies. And then there's Matt Falls. He of course he did Cyborg, which was the Van Damme movie. He did Bram Stoker's Dracula, and he also worked on
Yes.
Fright Night Part Two, which goes back to
Oh.
goes back to Steve Johnson, who I just talked about last episode, being one of my all-time favorite effects artists. Of course, Steve Johnson was the head artist on Fright Night Two, so Matt Falls worked under Steve Johnson. And then I find this really funny that one of the effects artists on this movie, his name is Robert Clark, um, aka Bob Clark. And of course, Robert Clark worked on like Cujo, People Under the Stairs. But at first, uh, when it said Bob Clark, because I think it says Bob Clark in the credits when the movie's going off, I was like, Bob Clark. Well, Bob Clark is the guy who fucking directed Black Christmas with Alan Ormsby, but that can't
Yeah.
be right. But then I realized, like, I guess it's Robert Clark who, like I said, did Cujo and People Under the Stairs.
Yeah, yeah, I'm seeing that on IMDb. It looks like he was uncredited
Really?
somehow. I don't know. I'd
Because
have
I
to
could
go
have
back and
swore,
rewatch the I don't
yeah, because I think at the end of the movie it says
or
something like special effects something Bob Clark.
Oh, I know what it is. It says on IMDb, it says special makeup effects supervisor, and then it says Rourke Productions parentheses uncredited. So I guess
Ah, okay.
he was there on behalf of Rourke Productions, but they didn't credit that company.
Okay, yeah. Okay, because I knew I saw his name, but I just knew that when it said Bob Clark, that I was like, well, that can't be the writer director Bob Clark. So I knew it had to
Yeah.
be him.
So okay, so we've got some
Yeah,
big
definitely,
names who
yeah.
work on some big movies.
But yeah, that's pretty much as far as my knowledge goes on the effects. Um, and kudos to them, great effects.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean between the villain, between the stuff that's happening in real life and the kind of over the top purposely cheesy effects in these movies within a movie and the stuff that they built for the theater like the big mosquito gag and all the other little props and little things that went into it, it's just so charming and so
God, that
fun and
mosquito.
it really yeah, the mosquito is so it's so cool and like that, that is ultimately Toby's undoing. So I think definitely great art direction in this movie from top to bottom.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Well, so that pretty much wraps up our effects. Katie, give me your final epitaph of old popcorn here.
I legitimately loved this movie. I immediately went on Twitter and was like, "Where has this movie been my whole life?"
Right.
I feel like this is a movie that I should have seen when I was like 12 and 13, watching like Pumpkinhead and Silver Bullet and all these movies for the first time that my big brother was showing me. I wish that, I'm gonna have to ask him if he's seen this. He might not have even seen this movie. I think it's such a great mood, such a great vibe. It still kind of has an 80s vibe because it's only 1991,
Right.
but because it's 1991, we're starting to get some of that 90s feeling. Like everything's a little bit shinier, kind of the hairstyles and the clothes are getting to be a little bit more different, a
Hmm.
little bit removed from the 80s. And I think the characters are all very likable. They clearly all get along with each other very well. They have great chemistry. And while we've, kind of broken down some of the issues with the plot and maybe how we wanted more out of it, I think overall it's a pretty nice, tight, neat little movie. Definitely it's a fun popcorn movie. Like its name is appropriate. This is definitely a movie you want to eat popcorn to. And I have a feeling that a lot of the movies that we're going to talk about are movies that you're going to want to watch with other people. Because I've said this. This is now the third episode in a row. This is a movie that you definitely want to watch with a group of people and just have a good time. Crack open a few beers or maybe some sparkling water if you don't partake, and just have a nice evening watching popcorn.
And I feel like this is a little bit of a gateway into my personal interest because we've known each other for a really long time now, and you've always heard me
Mhm.
talk about this horror movie, that horror movie, blah blah blah. Um, and this was a fun way. This is why I wanted this show to be the two of us because again, the little bit of a just a minor generational gap. But it was a way for me to be like, hey, check this shit out. Like, check out these movies that I love that you don't hear other fuckers talk about. And those movies are exactly what you say they are. They're the fun popcorn movies that you want to watch with a group. And that's my type of movie, man. Like I love my serious horror. I love my Hereditary and my
Yep.
Midsummer. And I this is probably a conversation for another time. But I fucking adored the Suspiria remake. But I
Yes.
I also love my popcorn and the movie popcorn.
Yep.
So yeah, I genuinely think this movie it's a goddamn travesty that people don't talk about this movie more.
Mhm. Yeah, it really bums me out that it's not, that's why I'm saying I'm hoping it's gonna have a renaissance pretty soon. I think enough time has passed that it's probably time for it to be solidified as a cult classic. So normally, this is the part of the episode where I ask you how this rates on the TNA meter, but there's not even a single one of it either in this movie from my recollection.
I've got an answer. So yeah, I've got an answer. I'm going to give it 0 stars for the TNA meter. However, I did say earlier that if I made this movie, there would be two things I would do differently. Remember, I said one I would talk about later.
I did.
Okay, so one I said, there would be a much higher body count. Probably every motherfucker in that theater would get killed. Second, me myself would probably throw in a little bit of TNA. It's a goddamn fucking shame that the character of Joni, the little quirky, cute nurse, or she's dressed up as a nurse.
Yeah.
As a fan of '80s horror that's always got boobs in it, that she is that character that you are just like any minute
It's
now,
gonna happen.
any minute now, and it never fucking happens. And that's a little bit of a
Yeah,
letdown. It's a little bit of a letdown. However, this is I want you to mark this on the calendar, Katie. I want you to mark this down. We're going to mark it down. We're going to save it. We're going to put it in like, a chamber so we can reflect on this years to come. Are you ready?
okay.
Because you'll never probably hear me say this again. I'm okay that this movie didn't have nudity.
Wow. That's a first.
Yeah, it's
I'm usually the person that says that.
Yeah, and well, the reason I say that, and people that don't know me is going to listen to these shows and think I'm just some kind of fucking sleaze bucket or some shit. Um,
Yeah, yeah, which
but
is
yeah,
so the opposite of the truth.
yeah, it is. But fuck it, whatever. Um, I grew. Listen, folks, I'm a horror fanatic. I eat, sleep, breathe shit horror movies. Have my whole life, and I'm sorry that I grew up during the heyday where every horror movie had at least one tit. So it's ingrained in me. It's
It's
imprinted
fan
on me.
service.
Yeah, I can't get away from it. However, um, there are movies that are done well enough that keep your attention and that are so fun that you don't need that shit because technically no movie or horror movie at all needs nudity. Nudity is just there
Right.
to either titillate, literally titillate, or just to get a rise out of people, or just to get asses in seats. Um, this movie, maybe they thought it was dead on arrival and it was going to flop, and which I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of it. Maybe it was a huge flop. I don't know, and of course,
It flopped.
obviously people have forgotten all about it. But to me, it's a good enough movie. It keeps your attention. The flow is so fucking good, and it didn't need nudity. There was not a there
Yeah,
when the movie was over with, I was like, well, that could have used a boob or two, but no, fine with it, cool with it. So yes, it does get 0 stars on the TNA meter. Yes, it should at least had one boob, maybe, but I'm fine that it did.
alright, well then, there you go, that's enough for me.
So I guess that's everything. Any last words on our lovely movie of the evening, Popcorn?
No, I think that about wraps it up for me.
Well, I guess that wraps it up for me. I hope you folks enjoyed our episode of Popcorn with Jill Schoelen month. We'll be returning in exactly 2 weeks. We want to thank our sponsor, Troma. Be sure to subscribe to Troma now at watch.troma.com and get your first month for free. Troma, 46 years of disrupting media.
And we want to thank everyone who listened to our show today or tonight or whatever time it is in whatever part of the world you're in. I did want to say we do have a Twitter. If you want to hang out and chat at us there, you can find us on Twitter at Video Express Pod. So we'll be, be posting show updates and maybe some memes and some silly stuff later down the road. So come check us out.
Shit just got real. We've got a Twitter.
It's official now.
Official, official. All right, well, guys, thank you for tuning in tonight. Tuning in, is that what the kids still say that? Is tuning in still a thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think people say it and they don't know what it literally means, but sure, yeah, they tune in.
What would you replace that with?
They log in, they dial
What?
in, I don't
What?
know.
Well, fuck it. Thank you
I
guys
don't
for
know.
tuning in. Until next time, just remember, please be kind, rewind, but most importantly, just be kind. I'm Matt,
And I'm Katie.
and we'll catch you on the next episode of Video Express.
Bye-bye.